Been a busy time here at Adat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. I missed a lot last weekend. I was out of town. I missed Beatles Shabbat, which was an amazing success. I missed the second annual Winter Musicale, which was just as amazing in a totally different way. But I had a good excuse. I did. I was with my family. Before I left for the weekend, I was talking to someone who remembered that my dad has passed away about a year ago, and she said, "Is this the unveiling for your dad?" And I love that so much because, yes, it was kind of exactly that without being that at all. So my dad wasn't Jewish, he wasn't religious either. So it was kind of and my sister was planning this event. It was like a non-memorial memorial. Another true thing about my father is that he was a professional Frisbee player. And so my sister planned a museum-style Frisbee exhibit, which was kind of impossible to explain to people what this was until you saw it in person. So throughout my dad's career, he was great at saving stuff, but not really organizing it. And so my sister Tara organized everything. The whole museum exhibit, Akiva was there and he was filming it. I helped take care of my mom. She's not well, she has Alzheimer's. And my brother-in-law, Jason, helped take care of their kid, the baby nephew, the grandson, Orion. And of course, we all helped with the setup and the takedown of the event. It was really profound. It was truly a non-unveiling unveiling. And it was distracting from world events, a good distraction. I missed a lot here at Adat Shalom last weekend, but also for a couple of days there, I wasn't following the news as closely as usual. But when I started checking my email again, I was like, all right, this community, as always, is keeping me on track, keeping me aware of things that I should be aware of, things that I should know that are going on in the world. People continue to be afraid and unsure about what's happening in our country. And meanwhile, other people continue to be confident that our country's on the right track. And from the emails that I'm receiving from our community, it seems like fear is winning out. I heard about, from a member of our community, another shul down the road, a place like our community that is politically diverse. Apparently, a rabbi there made some statements about the current government. It's, oh my gosh, people are freaking out. There was a link to the sermon. By the time I went to click on it, the link had been taken down. I've also heard about another shul down the road. This is a different community where it's not so politically diverse. And there are apparently in this community certain political views that divert from the norm for that community are not permitted to be heard. And so there are advantages and disadvantages to political diversity versus political sameness. Of course, I hear from individuals in our community with very, very strong views. One person said, "Don't be afraid, Rabbi, to tell everyone in our community that my view is the correct view." Saying, there are those in your community who might disagree with my views, but listen to me because I've been a member for such and such number of years, and I'm thinking it's sort of like, your child, your son, when it's like, the other parent says that, it's, they're my community, but isn't it your community as well if you've been a member for X number of years? Anyways, this is our Adat Shalom community, and this is our global Jewish community. The conversations are continuing to get more difficult. I'm a member of the Rabbinical Assembly. It's a rabbinical organization for conservative rabbis. The Rabbinical Assembly continues to make statements about things, and the email listservs fly, and not all the rabbis agree with the statements that our organization is making. There were some emails going on this past week about proposed changes to education that might lead to more funding for Jewish day schools. Opinions are very mixed about whether or not this is a good thing. In our country in general, do Jews feel like what's going on in our country, is it good for Israel? Not everyone agrees. Is this country becoming a less and less safe place to be Jewish? Not everyone agrees on that either. So a question that we can come back to in this conversation are, what are the Jewish values? What are the Jewish values? And this week's Parashat, Mishpatim, provides a lot of great content for those who want to say that social justice aligns with Jewish values. So we're going to look at some verses from this week's Parashat. I'm concerned that some of you will feel personally validated and others might feel personally attacked. That's not my intention. I just want to read these verses in their English translation together. I will provide a little bit of my own commentary, but I'm not intending to advance a particular viewpoint. I just want us to look and I want us to not be afraid. So we're looking at the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verses 2 through 11, and these verses are about social justice. So here we go. You shall neither side with the mighty to do wrong. You shall not give perverse testimony in a dispute so as to pervert it in favor of the mighty, nor shall you show deference to a poor person in a dispute. So, money is power. We have to be sure that there is fairness, even when there's power imbalance, because everyone deserves fairness. Our verses continue, and this is very, very difficult, at least for me, and I think for us all, with the events that have unfolded in Israel the past couple of days. When you encounter your enemy's ox or donkey wandering, you must take it back and return it to them. When you see the donkey of your enemy lying under its burden and would refrain from raising it, you must nevertheless help raise it. You have to treat your enemies with fairness. This is very, very difficult this week. And some would say it's very, very difficult in general, treating your enemies with fairness. We continue. You shall not subvert the rights of the needy in their disputes. You can't take advantage of people just because they're poor, making them easy targets. Our next verse, keep far from a false charge. Do not bring death on those who are innocent and in the right, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. So don't subvert the law, even when it comes to the wealthy, even when it comes to your enemies. And now here's a very challenging one. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. I feel like we have a love-hate relationship with this one. As someone who has both Jewish and non-Jewish family, and both sides of my family are very politically diverse, my perspective is that people either really embrace this wholeheartedly, or they're like, whoa, I'm not really sure I want to do that. And for a variety of different reasons. I think it's very difficult for all of us to encounter those who are strange to you and treat them well and treat them appropriately. I think that people of all cultural and political backgrounds can struggle with this at different times and in different ways. All right, and I think this is the last verse we're looking at here. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but in the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave, let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. So this is generous and anti-capitalist to the point of perhaps being aspirational rather than achievable. 1/7, almost 15% of what you produce, you should just give away. Is that even possible? Or is it just a mitzvah? We have to do it. We can't question it. So these Jewish texts, these verses from our Parashat this week, they apply to all Jews in the global community, in the Los Angeles community, in the Adat Shalom community. Obviously, we don't all feel the same way about them. Obviously, we don't all even interpret them in the same way. I have probably already said something that has made people upset, even with my brief commentary so far. And if that's true, I want to hear from you at Kiddush or after Shabbat. Send me an email or give me a call. I always want to talk. Now, one way I see the global Jewish community dividing on these sorts of issues is whether this social justice applies to just the Jewish community as we interact with one another, or does it also apply in the same way to Jews interacting with non-Jews? Do we have to treat non-Jews like us? And does this have anything to do with how safe or unsafe Jews are in the world? And so the traditional Jewish view, when we look at the Talmud, it's quite clear we don't have to treat non-Jews the same way we treat Jews. But this is a different time and people's views have moved on. So I'll show a couple of different examples. I'll speak about a couple of different examples. And the first one is the organization HIAS. The organization HIAS is one that has a strong connection to our community, to my family, to lots of people who have lots of support for this organization, have supported this organization over the years. And so I'll read a little bit from their history on their website. So originally set up by Jews to help fellow Jews for reasons of religious imperative and communal solidarity, HIAS in the 2020s, that is today, is a multi-continent, multi-pronged humanitarian aid and advocacy organization with thousands of employees dedicated to helping forcibly displaced people around the world in keeping with the organization's Jewish ethical roots. Continuing from its work in the 1990s, HIAS expanded its resettlement work to include assistance to non-Jewish refugees from the former Yugoslavia, East Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. In 2003, HIAS entered into its first partnership in decades with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to assist asylum seekers from Ukraine. Over the next 2 decades, partnering with the UN Refugee Agency to help refugees, regardless of religion or ethnicity, became HIAS's way of working, assisting refugees not because they are Jewish, but because HIAS is Jewish. And in this new concept, this is aligned with HIAS's Jewish values. So the way that I interpret this, the way that I see this, and I remember having some conversations with people that saw it the same way in our community. We were doing better as a global Jewish community, and so we had more resources, and we decided to extend those resources to help non-Jews as well. Now that's a little bit controversial. So, example number 2. This is a little anecdote from an Orthodox community in New Jersey. And I read about this anecdote in a book called Tablet Shattered. It's written by Joshua Leifer. I heard about this book and about him through the Times of Israel. It's a very interesting perspective. I do not agree with everything in the book, but I do recommend it. It gave me a lot to think about and a lot to disagree with. And so he grew up, Joshua Leifer, on the East Coast in a conservative Jewish community, but then he married someone from the Haredi community. So he's got a very diverse perspective. And he writes about visiting an Orthodox yeshiva with his brother-in-law. And this is a yeshiva called Beth Medrash Gavoha, or BMG, as people call it locally. It's in Lakewood, New Jersey, and it has 8,000 students, of course, all men. And so here's the anecdote. We arrived in the parking lot and parked as everyone else had, which is to say, we blocked in several other cars and left the key inside. So whoever's car we'd obstructed would be able to move it later. I laughed and looked at my brother-in-law incredulously when he explained the system. This is what you can do, his brother-in-law said, when everyone in the community trusts each other. If you needed to get your car out, it was simple. You just get into someone else's car and you move it. It's no big deal. What surprised me, says Leifer, wasn't just that the car, that private, inviolable kingdom of the solitary American, carried no sanctity here. It was also that the sense of security, the belief in one's neighbors, was so deep, so different from the paranoias of theft and deceit that grip regular American life. In general, the community practices a soft collectivism when it comes to private property. It is more kibbutz than conventional suburb. So what I see in this, if we're all Jews here, if we're all bound to the same mitzvot, we can have a different level of trust. All right, so I've offered some observations, I've offered some texts here, but what am I really getting at in this conversation? It's to answer the question, what is my job? It is not my job to tell you how to vote or how to see American politics. Some people think that's my job because some rabbis do that, but I'm not one of those rabbis. That's not who I am, and that's not what our community needs. What I am going to do, what our community does need, is for me to teach you and learn with you about what it means to be in a politically, ideologically diverse community. Because after all, that's the American people, that's the Jewish people, and that's us, we Adat Shalom people. That's more practical. That's what I see as my job. So how do we do this? You might not like it, but here it is. We have to be kind. We have to be open-minded, willing to learn and willing to see things differently. This might lead to us changing our opinions. This might lead to shifts in what news media we follow and learn from. We're probably not going to change our political party, but we might change our viewpoint. And we have to tolerate our differences with generosity. Tolerate our differences with generosity. Now, this is a great phrase. I didn't make it up myself. To give my source, I'll close with this teaching. It's not actually a teaching about community, it's a teaching about relationships, which is, community is built on relationships. It's from an article in the New York Times, which is not a political statement that I'm making. It's from 2016. You might have heard of it already. It's an opinion piece that got a lot of popularity. It's called Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person. So it's the cynicism draws you in, but really it's an article, it's a perspective really in favor of relationships and partnerships. And it says, we don't need to abandon our partner if we abandon the idea that a perfect being exists who can meet all of our needs and satisfy our every yearning. We want this from our partners, we want this from our friends, we want this from our community to always agree with us. But the author continues, the person, and I'd add the friend, the community, who is best suited to us is the person or friend or community who will negotiate differences intelligently, the person who is good at disagreement. Rather than some idea of perfect complementarity, it is the capacity to tolerate differences with generosity that is the true marker of a strong partnership, of a strong community. As we continue to live and be in community with one another, may we continue to develop our capacity to tolerate our differences with generosity. And when, not if, but when we disagree with one another, may we do so with deep, deep love. Shabbat Shalom.